You want me to hit continue? Hi, welcome to the third Knowlton Literary Festival webinar. I'm Jane Livingston, Chair of the Literary Association. You are about to meet 6 talented poets from the Eastern Townships. As a reminder, the townships are on the traditional and unceded territories of the Abenaki and the Wabanaki peoples. Before proceeding with our webinars, I wanted to say a few words in recognition of the heartbreaking news of the discovered unmarked graves of all those Indigenous children, young lives callously discarded. I cannot find the words, so instead, I urge all of us to educate ourselves, starting with Phyllis Webstat's website, orangeshirtday.org. Take guidance from a woman who is a residential school survivor. Beyond learning, we can write to our members of parliament and our provincial representatives, encouraging them to provide support, both financial and otherwise, to the First Nations people. Now, I want to introduce you to our Master of Ceremonies, Roger Williams, who's going to lead you into the most wonderful poetry session. Please enjoy the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Hello, my name is Roger Williams, and it's my pleasure on behalf of the Knowlton Literary Festival to welcome you this evening to a poetry reading. In the introduction to a recently published anthology of poems, it's entitled Emergence, Angela Luke, the editor, tells of her move from Montreal to the town of Hatley in 2013 and the journey of exploration that she embarked on. She set out to discover the region's literary scene, and what she found surprised and delighted her. In particular, she uncovered deep and extended seams of poetry, and especially poetry written by women, rich and diverse in its language, its imagery, and its insights. The result is Emergence, in which she includes the work of no fewer than 24 of these contemporary poets. Tonight, we're very happy that 6 of them have agreed to join us, and in their readings, I know you will hear the richness and diversity of which I spoke. Their readings will be accompanied by photos, not just of the poets themselves, but of the landscape in which their poems were nurtured. The photos were taken by Louise Abbott, whose books, films, and photographs have themselves become enthusiastically recognized as champions of the culture and the heritage of this part of the world. Louise also is a founding member and the person responsible for the publishing arm of Studio Georgeville, which in fact produced this book. In this way, we hope to present you with a feast for the ear and for the eye. Our first guest is Heather Davis. Heather lives in Lennoxville. She began writing poetry in 1978, and it has remained a constant part of her life. Not just a practitioner of the word, Heather is a teacher of the word. She teaches writing and children's literature at the Université de Sherbrooke and at Bishop's University. Heather, welcome. Our audience is yours.
Hi. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you, Heather.
Okay, great. So I'm happy to be here and sharing some poems from the book. A lot of these poems that I've written are about, well, I have to say first, poetry is great for when you're a teenager writing poetry when you have lots of angst. But I discovered a certain amount of angst in being the mother of a teenager as well. So the first one is origami. My daughter makes the tiniest origami crane. It fits in the small elastics she puts on her braces. But today I am the origami. She folds me. I give up, let myself fold. Today I choose peace. Later I will free myself, fly away. And the second one I'll read is epilepsy. So to add to some challenges in our household, my daughter started to suffer from epilepsy when she started adolescence, which led to trying a lot of different medications and a lot of extra intense moods. So epilepsy. Disorder has become the natural order, a jungle of teenage moods. Pills and side effects affect us all. Marching along fault lines. Your fault, not mine. Yes, I'll drive you to school. You choose the music. There's nothing for lunch. Waiting for spring break before I break. Who's sensitive now? The dog still likes me. Please, Instant Pot, make me dinner. Quietly, 2 weeks go by without a seizure. The good news snuck in while we were washing the dishes again. And another one along those lines, God is in the details. My dog sleeping on the front lawn, nose in the grass, the fur on the carpet. A book of cartoons and my daughter's homework splayed across the couch. A painting she did when she was 5 adorns the mantelpiece. Asking her to do dishes is a path to war. 7 chunky white candles stand in the fireplace like bowling pins. The ceiling is looking worse for wear. I am feeling that way. Summer can't arrive fast enough. God is in all the seasons, not just summer. But you wouldn't know it when all that snow keeps falling in April and we are fed up. In the summer, you barely need to get dressed. Just walk out the door and say, "Hi, God." I never believed in God, but I believe this life will make more sense in retrospect than it does doing the doggy paddle in the middle. I feel like a terrible swimmer, like I lost my compass back in 2nd grade, like I should buy a Volkswagen van and drive away, like someone should make me a sandwich. God is in the teenagers, so why fret? I don't believe in God, but I believe in the details. And the second last one is from an end of the year recital from a time a little further back of my daughter taking violin lessons. The recital. We feel the longing in the room, parents desperate for their children to acquire culture, raise them up in society. Parents breathe in their children and breathe out hopes and dreams. My daughter looks overwhelmed, wanting to hide, but wanting to be the star, jealous of the pieces the advanced students can play. A mother is dying of cancer, or not, we don't know, but her daughter sits in her lap closer than most kids her age would. Suddenly, a song so happy the air exhales, faces lighten. We feel like dancing. 2 girls are playing a reel and we're clapping. And now there's a solo by a girl I love. She wears pale brown and gray, beautiful like lichen and moss. Then there are the 2 adopted girls who carry pain that all their foster families' attentions won't erase. But it helps so much. The players get older, but now a toddler is disrupting the show. It's all about him. A group waxes melodical, one girl a head taller than the rest. She is our babysitter. And now, as the toddler screams, the second oldest girl plays an Irish song. Forgets, starts again. The music teacher smiles with effort. The last song is by the violin teacher's daughter, dressed in black and dark grays. She astounds us with the intricate piece that her mother played when she was the same age. Proof that sometimes it all works out, or at least repeats itself. New versions of the same old songs, a tiny bit better, we the mothers hope. And the last one is a poem that I wrote at the beginning of the pandemic about a children's book. I love children's books and picture books, and I teach children's literature classes. And this is for Margaret Wise Brown, who lived only 42 years, but she published more than 100 children's books in her lifetime and many more after she died, including Goodnight Moon and also The Dead Bird. So it starts with a quote from her book that goes, "And every day until they forgot, they went and sang to their little dead bird and put fresh flowers on his grave." So that's from The Dead Bird. You knew that no child could ignore a dead bird. You knew that every child needs to pick up that bird and carry it somewhere safe. You knew that children everywhere grieve by singing and picking flowers and gathering together. You knew that the world's children needed this lesson in death, because death needs no lesson in children. You knew that for a child, as for all of us, the only tragedy is when we refuse to carry, to create beauty, to inhale, or to sing. Good night, regular life. Good night, exponential curve. Good night, moon. And so that's all for me.
Thank you so much, Heather.
Welcome.
Gillian Eastley's resume is a coat of many colors. She began life in Oxford, in England, and now lives in Knowlton. Along the way, she has devoted much of her time and talents to the field of education, working especially with children who have had learning, behavioral, or second language difficulties. Gillian has regularly presented exhibitions of her artwork. She plays the French horn. She sings in a women's choir. Tonight, we meet her as a poet. Gillian, welcome.
Thank you. I don't seem to be on screen, but my photograph is.
You are there, Gillian.
The poems
Reassured.
Am I? Oh, okay.
Yes.
That's good to know. The poems I'm going to read this evening were all written within the last year, because as Roger said, I've spent a large part of my life encouraging children to write rather than myself. But I guess about 3 years ago, I wandered into a Right Here, Right Now meeting at Knowlton Library and met Jan Draper and a lot of other wonderful people, and kept on going back because I was curious on how to start the writing process. And then a year ago, just over a year ago, on a Zoom call, Phyllis Size, who is appearing also tonight, revealed that she had been writing a poem a day for the last 6 weeks. And she dared Jan and I to do the same. So that made me write more regularly. So these poems are a result of that initial kickstart. The first poem I would like to read is called The Prize-Winning Turkey. Every year I visit Brome Fair and I always visit the turkey. The cage was much too small, barely adequate for him to stretch his wrinkled rose-pink naked neck, reveal the glorious spread fan tail, pure white and delicately edged with black. He fluffed his feathers to inflate, and irritated by the pressing crowds, the chatter and the camera flash, he hissed, and visibly perturbed, shook his wattles, tossed his drooping snood, and turned his back. I have great empathy for that turkey since I hate cameras as well. The next poem I'd like to read is a childhood memory. It's set in Oxfordshire, where I'm from, and I was probably about 8 to 10 when this happened. Shotover, it's called Blackberrying on Shotover Hill, and Shotover is a wild area just east of Oxford. Rough, grassy slopes were clumped with gorse, ringed with narrow tracks, worn deep by sheep and deer. We followed Dad in a straggling line, armed with crooks and sturdy pails, scampering over the tussocky grass. We watched for rabbit holes, wary of a twisted foot. The brambles grew thick there, heavy with luscious fruit, but sharp with vicious thorns that snagged our shirts, tore our skin. We reached for the highest, the best, the most, filling our pails until the light grew gold. Scratched and sore, tired, content, our mouths stained purple, fingernails ingrained, we knew that tomorrow the air would be ripe with the scent of jam, and that there would be pie. The next poem is called Fox. In the pandemic, you seem to notice much more of your environment than you probably normally would have time for. And so I think I've documented over the past few months pretty much every creature and bird that has come into my garden. Fox. He didn't seem afraid, trotting through the gap between the beans while we picked and weeded neat rows of carrots, peas, and kale. A bronze shadow flecked with gold where light glinted off his back. His thick brush tail, white-tipped, black-rimmed, ears alert. Bent on some intent, he didn't glance our way or deviate from his determined route. Had I not seen him yesterday race across the lawn and grasp in desperate mid-leap a fleeing squirrel, a panicked breath away from the safety of the walnut tree, bite into her neck and shake, then limp weight drooping from his jaws, pause with heaving flanks, drag off his prey. Then I would have thought him almost harmless. I had forgotten the need to kill. This next poem is one that's not in the book. It's quite different. It's about one of those turning points in life. If this had not happened, then I wouldn't be here, and my life would have been completely different. It takes place in southern France several decades ago on the Canal du Midi. If we had never met that day, joined mutual friends and gone to stay in France, sat under plane trees in the square, the scent of roses in the air, then danced, drifted by the sunflower fields, while overhead the swallows wheeled, entranced. At sunset, found a spot to moor, and set out planning to explore, then glanced. Walked hand in hand through twisting lanes, by glow of lamps in window panes enhanced. Found a terrace with a vine, raised our glasses, drank the wine, and chanced. What then? The next poem, the one before the last, is another Turkey, but Istanbul, Turkey. A holiday several years ago. I think this took place in early March, and it snowed. And we were told it was the first time it had snowed at that time of year in 28 years. Nobody quite knew what to do. It's called Out of the Blue. It snowed in Istanbul when we were there. Soft, wet flakes bemused the tourists, clogged the tram tracks, busy streets. Traffic stopped, so people, bootless, sloshed and slid through thick, wet drifts, or waited, shivered, hoping that a bus might come. Sultanahmet Square lay flawless, white as linen cloth before the mosque, where domes gleamed blue as if fresh varnished, slick with ice and melted snow. Fluted minarets aimed spearhead tips to pierce the glooming sky and puncture, spill the contents of the clouds, douse the city with obliterating shroud, stifling voice and footfall, all. And later, as the sun burned down, turned silvered snow to soft, wet slush, merchants swept the stoops of melting heaps, while shoppers slipped and awnings dripped. We ducked beneath a lintel, found a table, sat, ordered simit and hot apple tea. The glasses warmed our hands, the waiter beamed, and in the sunshine, all the sidewalks steamed. And the last poem, also not in the book, was written on a cold February day with snow outside, and I hadn't a clue what to write, which must be a situation a lot of people have found themselves in. So I wrote about the fact I couldn't think of anything to write. It's called A Nothing Day. A grimly, sadly dreary day, and I have nothing much to say. Inspiration has dissolved. No clever phrase has yet evolved. No memory that I wish to share. And if I did, who'd really care? No rant or theme or diatribe. Nothing beauteous to describe. But whining, I was always told, is unattractive in the old. So I'll close my eyes and build a dream, picturing a glowing scene, a peacock sea and silver sand, my body young again and tanned, a gentle honey-scented breeze, a plate of olives, grapes and cheese, the closeness of a lover's arms, a man obsessed with all my charms. But stop, this sybaritic stroll is lurching out of my control. Wake up, think real, think erudite. It is midday, the snow is white, no need to mope or grouch or whine. This too will pass and all is fine. But nice to know I can escape into my mind, rewind the tape. Now where's the closest garbage bin? I'll scrunch this up and chuck it in. And that's my presentation completed. Thank you very much.
Now, thank you so much, Julian. Rachel, who writes as R.A. Garber, is a resident of Maple Leaf, Quebec, and is another woman of many parts. She writes, she edits, she photographs, and in her career, she has appeared in the guise of art therapist, teacher, journalist, researcher, and community organizer. Happily for us, she found her way back to poetry. I hope that that Rachel is now able to join us. And indeed she is there. I'm delighted to have you with us, Rachel. And again, our audience is just waiting eagerly to hear from you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I don't know what happened, but I was actually waiting quite a while to get, allowed in by the powers that be in the ether. I just have a couple of comments first. Historically, women who write share something with witches. Both have chosen to break the norms that society has prescribed for them. I want to tell you a little local story. One year in the 1880s, in the present-day municipality of Newport, farmers in Island Brook were perplexed. Entire herds of cows had gone dry, but why? The farmers laid a trap in a cattle barn. and caught a large white rabbit. They suspected supernatural foul play and put several notches in its ears before setting it free. Soon after that, an old Irish family's wife named Peggy Green died. The farmers noticed her ears were notched, just like the rabbit's. They had found their witch. They buried her in the Irish cemetery on New Mexico Road, but the cows still did not give milk, so they walled in her grave to contain her ghost. Only then did the curse lift and the cows began to produce milk normally. So the story goes. The Witch of New Mexico Road lives on in the imaginations of today's inhabitants of our area, and this story inspired the first two poems I will read. Wantonly. Wanting to write about witchgrass cavorting, conquering the world, witches living in switchgrass houses, cauldron hanging over the fire pit, chickens downstairs, cats upstairs, witches with magic powers, changing water into milk. Witches, chickens, cats accursed, witches as simply women veiled with wisdom-searching soul. Women who shatter social norms, writing alive a new species. Women worried into silence. Witches flying over the moon, witnessing one small step for man and laughing hysterically. Witches unbridled, unharnessed, flying free, knowing nothing, understanding the whole. Wailing in grief, birthing a life force that possesses the power to transform. Wanting to write. Whatsoever my pen chooses to divulge as it wanders wild in the wastelands. Whatever presses itself upon my heart, drawing it down, raising it up. Woe, anger, wonder, awe. The title of the next poem is Malefica. I'm trying to touch a witch hunted down, hanged by the neck till dead, or burned at the stake, her hair flaming crimson. Maybe drowned because she floated, although trussed with a sack of rocks tied around her neck. If she escapes death, it is seen as proof she is guilty, and she is then killed another way. I'm trying to fathom the witch inquisitors who consecrate their careers to accusing and executing housewives, midwives, healers, how they condemn her for such happenstances as a cow's milk gone dry, speaking with a stammer, someone falling ill after a quarrel with a witch, or maybe her not feeling the prick of a pin. I'm flinching to feel her shame should someone see a small imperfection on her skin to be the devil's mark and proof of her witchery. How she hallucinates, sleep-deprived confessions of her and her accomplices' worship of the devil. The sheer pain of being cast out from you, marked by mass hysteria as evil, condemned to die. I'm astounded to learn my witch has 3,212 sisters in Scotland, and one even is my neighbor, Peggy Green, here on New Mexico Road. It's a senseless story of cows freshening up without calving, then going dry when she dies, probably by foul play, And she climbing out of her grave and haunting the road, asking, what's so wicked about an independent woman with a cat? The title of the next poem is The Embrace. Now, butternut buds bulge. The pond publishes piercing peeps. The ground awakens into gracious green. The evening emerges into spring. She is blind to this burgeoning, her vitality entrapped, subjugated. She observes him, fearing. He scrutinizes her, hating. They are as in an ancient Greek tragedy, locked in a dance, spinning toward a slumber that repudiates rebirth. And then he cannot believe that she wants to leave. Everyone he has ever held dear has left or let him down, another kind of leaving. And now, her. Stay, his voice pleads, but he grips her shoulder with a steely force, his other hand a fist aimed at her face. Her body becalmed. She is on a branch high in the butternut tree above, watching their bizarre embrace. Finally, only the lilacs were trembling. That's what she remembers later when she finally rejoins her body. And their sweet scent. As for him, he remembers nothing, nothing, but that she too has abandoned him. A betrayal that endures, hard as a butternut. Yet at first light, he still clutches her, and she him, each from the other, begging a blessing. And the last poem is with a glance back to my childhood. It's entitled To the Outhouse. Stealth crouches inside her. If no one sees her, does she exist? Yet she's the wet grass anointing her bare feet. The sky with its many-eyed silence. The cat lurking near the outhouse door, eyes gleaming. A velvet-bodied bat breezing by, glancing past her hair. She pulls her nightie tight to her. Eyes, yes, eyes, or no eyes. She inhabits this moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel, very much. I'm so glad we found you in time. Tanya Jane McIntyre was a visual artist before she expanded her multimedia artwork to take in poetry. She lives in the Stansted Ogden area, where she practices a passion for creating beautiful gardens. Tanya has a fine arts degree from Bishop's University and has recently is on her poetry. Tanya.
Yes, good evening. Such wonderful words thus far. Such a pleasure to be here in virtual Knowlton with all of you. I'm going to read a couple of poems from Emergence and a couple more from a book my book that is about to go off to print in the coming days, published by Angela Luke's Shoreline Press. Yes, I'm going to begin with one from Emergence called Mildred. She grew up Anglican, talking to saints, and it was true the smell of roses broke out at times. That means my prayer will be answered, she would say. Lovely was her handwriting and letters that pled. A school teacher she wanted to be, but went to wash bedclothes the summer after 5th grade. At the Big Lake rooming house, water snakes scared her, and later 56 hours a week at the glove shop. All the pay to her mama, Emma, a large, gruff woman come up from the south, giving 5 pretty daughters coal black hair, powder fine skin, and never a flinch of shyness. Come hell or high water, my grandmother could procure anything she saw our heart was set on. Or right any injustice, she'd pick up that black receiver and pretend to be anyone. Call the plowman, the weatherman, the principal to close the school before snow ever started. Call Sears, call the mayor, call the butcher, of course. Everyone in the town knew Mildred, and the phone book was thick in those days. More selfless she was than anyone. Ironed irreversible creases in my good black jeans and called them slacks. Her advice I ignored, from how laundry absolutely must be hung, ways to use Bisquick, how to beat the devil in solitaire, to the evils of ending up with a lazy man, warning what would befall all of us should I fail to understand. I see her now running a comb through her hair, still thick and black after the chemo. In the rearview mirror, she told me as we sped to town that driving was easy, not much to it but steering. It was a miracle, everyone said, that she never took the ditch, that she never had pain, even when it reached her bones. That everyone in her room that day smelled roses. And now, keeping with a woman theme, I'm going to read one more from Emergence called Dishes. The women stood with their hands in the water, their backs to the voices, other messes, sometimes glancing at what lay out the window, or for some, not a window, but a mirror they could check in for improved or worsened lines. Sometimes for after, there was an Avon hand cream dispenser in the shape of a bird or an ear of corn. The women stood with their hands in the water in all kinds of weather except lightning. Sometimes they hurried to be finished for the next task or just to sit down. Most often they were unaware of the dishes, beyond the deeming of dirty or clean. Sometimes they stood there with slow deliberation, so feelings could arrange into acceptable phrases before turning to face the room. Sometimes things broke down there and cut them in the murky water. Sometimes it would not go down even by the will of the plunger. Sometimes their rings slipped off from the soap and their hands were strange and nervous. But a thing they never ever did, regardless of their age or the hour, was to get into bed before their sink was empty, dried, and polished. And now for a couple from my book, which is called The House You Were Born In, which it is a collection of about 60 poems that read in sequence tell a story, the story of growing up on an ancestral farm in Ways Mills, Quebec. This one is the second poem in the book. It's called The House. What lived in the walls left arms to hang in resignation, hemmed by the rustling calico. The sill was scattered with the wire legs of flies, but in May by the door were newborn shoots of sumac. I skinned their velvet stems, leaving only the skeleton. In the distance was a figure no one could name. 2 black willows remained after the hurricane, one arched back in its declension, a hand receiving its pasture. Under a simmering parasol, a threshold of trees, wetted wood, a pall of leaves, witness bearers. Even our road was like that. Another called The Copse of Trees. Copse was a new word for me recently. I loved it. It's, in case anyone else doesn't know, it is those lovely stands of trees that you see in a field that you, in old fields, you don't tend to see them as much anymore. Many of them have been chopped down, but that is called a copse. The copse of trees. From the road, from the house, it was a green glass orb in summer, the copse of maple and ash, just before the field sloped down. Only once within did you see it was a world unto itself, self-contained. It was a place that would acknowledge you, would say, ah, it is you. And just yesterday, your mother and Wendy were playing right here, gesturing to the rusted tin cups and saucers strewn amidst the bloodroot. It was a testament to things unchanged, a dollhouse forest where a pair of woodchucks raised their yearly young. From the house, you could see them basking on their haunches when the sky turned like a kaleidoscope, every shade of coral and crimson, before dusk in its thickness released memory like pollen from events bound in root knots miles underground. You could hear it in the breeze that swept through the tops of the trees, the sound of layered skirts across a wooden floor, as though all things were conscious of their place at dusk, simply bearing the given. And each participating thing took hold anew, pulling the knot in tighter to a solemnity that hushed one and all, save the bullfrog, the giant mouth that choked, a bellow so hoarse and deep, it cued a starlit dirge on a perennial vigil. The frogs in their silken black mud knew there was always a soul for whom to mourn. And I'm afraid I did not look at the time, and I could read one more if there was time, and maybe John would be so kind as to tell, or Roger, I'm sorry, whether I had another couple of minutes or not.
Please go ahead, Tanya.
Yes, okay, thank you so much. I can read one called Doorbell, which is also both in Emergence and in my upcoming book. Doorbell. That year, someone had cut down the hydrangeas, as never should be done, and no cream-colored flowers flanked either side of the steps, where we sat and watched the end of summer play its games, by the round white rock flecked with mica, under the green front doorbell that rang a perfect ding-dong. Things inside you were failing. I took you away and brought you back again and again that year. You changed. I saw each change remove you. But when you saw me in the garden, through the summer kitchen window, in my new rummage sale straw hat, you said, next year, let's put 5 rows of the green beans next to the peas. Absence, the taking away, is a language that cannot be learned. The house that held you from the beginning knew no more what to do with itself than I did when it heard. The eastern sun was still the same for a time, coming up over the woods, but for days the wind took anything untethered for a joyride through the yard. Faithful to the seasons is that echo, rising up like water from the ground, a gust in the night that will not settle, caught in the chambers of a flue. I think about that round white rock flecked with mica, so long gone now, no one remembers it but me. And that perfect ding-dong of the green front doorbell is whorled in a 2-note helix with some filament of my brain, but gone as though it never was, is the way you said my name. Thank you so very much for listening.
Mine's on mute. Elizabeth, when you're ready, we are ready to hear from you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see myself in the, am I on?
You are indeed.
Okay, thank you very much. So my poems are, some of them are quite old, and the poems are about love and loss and the healing power of nature. So the first poem I'd like to read is an invocation called Bless Small Things. Bless small things, crickets and stones you can hold in your hand, coins from foreign countries, amber to rub when you're afraid. Bless small things, the child you once were, the child within you now. Bless the color blue, the healing sting of salt. And the next poem I'm going to read is a story about a story that I heard when I was younger about an affair that my grandmother had. And in this poem, there's a retelling of the story that I heard. It's called The Changing Season. My aunt loves to tell the story of how, as a girl, she found the note in my grandmother's apron pocket. It was printed on the back of an ordinary grocery list: milk, eggs, butter, in an awkward hand, as if each letter carved into the paper in black lead was carving out a request that could change a life. Please meet me at the lake tonight after dinner. I love you. The page was dusted with flour, as if during the making of the daily bread in that farm kitchen where she passed her days, kitchen clock ticking, she would take it out and read again and again what was being asked of her, her own body confused with heat and longing. My grandfather was not a loving man. His blackness made worse by spirits, he spent his time in the cellar alone, building worlds with model trains. He smelled of must and dampness and the subtle cruelty that comes with the holding back of love, atrophy of the heart, withering the cord that once had joined them. My aunt tells the story as if my grandmother went that night. She says they lay together, my grandmother and her lover, naked on the boathouse roof, on a quilt she had pieced and stitched the year before. My aunt says it was warm, the moon was almost full, and the geese were in the air and flying south, their honking warning of the changing season. This next poem is called Grandfather, after W.S. Merwin. I like to imagine that I'll see you again, and we'll be in the garden by the lake with the lilies and Sweet William, and your red wheelbarrow will be filled with the rich, fragrant compost from the kitchen. I won't be older than I was then, a small girl of 5, but I will already have passed through all the sadnesses and losses of my life. And you will take my hand, and we'll watch the clouds passing over the sun. And you will tell me what you couldn't tell me then, that this is how love learns to know itself. And we'll be together in the garden by the lake, enchanted by clouds drifting over the sun, with the lilies and Sweet William. Lilacs. I am fading into lilac, now fading into my pastel self, remembering a springtime long ago. Lilacs too high for a child to reach. My father holds the ladder as I climb that stairway to the sky. My 5-year-old face in lilacs. When I think of him now, I smell their jasmine honey. In the graveyard, the lilacs grow. Beside the fence, covered with lichen, a rusty, half-open gate. Black granite, his name etched in stone. I put the small mauve blossom on my tongue, a remedy to forgetting. And I found that there have been a lot of deer that are coming into my garden. And so I wrote a poem called A Deer Has Found Her Way Again. A deer has found her way again into my garden and eaten the electric lime green hosta leaves as her evening salad. Only spikes too tough to chew remain, her audacious thank you note. How selective she is, this creature who has traveled out of the wild, contra naturam, to cross roads and cottagers' fences for this very plant in my garden. She bypasses large blue-green hostas, shoots of purple bellflowers, the plump buds of pink lilies, bee balm, and all the others. How I wish I could so follow my own longing to say, well, yes, this is what I really want, and then go for it with abandon. This body is a body that loves what it loves. Black velvet dresses, oil of roses, the piano of Satie. At the edge of waterfalls, this body will take its time before making the final slide. Yet, when I dream of you, it is not this body, but something wild. Dark body, cloaked in feathers, I plunge towards you, warm and wet as your tongue, dying to myself in the art of body, breathing. So the next poem is called Bokaseki, Bee Garden. And I wrote this poem as an ekphrastic with an artist friend, but there's a strong feeling that this is my own poem because my mother is aging, 94 years old, and these are the words that I wish she would say to me. I'm feeling about losing her. So, Bokaseki, Bee Garden. Just beyond your paper's edge, forest. Branches bowing strings of wind coming off the mountain. You hear the music of your childhood, your father's violin, and in moments between the rills on the still pond, your mother's face. Daughter, don't be afraid now I'm gone. The Japanese know 72 seasons. Bee garden. See how the great purple heads of coneflowers tilt toward the autumn sun, curl into their own fading amaranth, now bend down to listen to the earth to which they soon will become. The yellow bird alighting in the apple, sparrows darning twigs in thickets, the buzz of bees in echinacea will soon melt into the stridulation of crickets. Below the surface, a bulb waiting to be born. Okaseki, if I could leave a message for you, it would be in these marks. And now a poem that's not in Emergence, but it's a poem I wrote this winter. I spent the winter with my husband, Peter, in isolation at the lake. And every morning we would wake up, and it was a beautiful winter, and we would go out snowshoeing. So we've been married close to 50 years, and it was a refinding of a certain type of love. Winter. Today we snowshoed through the snowy pass, protected land. Our steps crunch, the only sound in a silent forest, punctuated once by a woodpecker's castanet, and once by the hollow sound of wood on wood, Buddhist, like bamboo chimes. Above us, big sky, a blue I wish I painted with my fingers. Sunlight flickered, shadowed through the maples, our breathing hard as we climbed the hills, rested, then climbed again and again. You walked before me. I studied your back, thinking about your skin beneath all those clothes and the way your hips move, not with the lust of younger days, but with aged love, burnished, slow time, ambered. Through the years, I've come to know some little things about you. Yesterday was your birthday. You are not afraid to die. We have been together almost 50 years, yet still I love when you come to me in our white protected land, in our winter, such beauty and respite. And the last poem I'll read is Petrichor. So petrichor is the smell that comes after a very dry spell when after rain. Petrichor. All night in the dark, rain arriving from another time, and I am a girl again in my iron bed in our old green cabin by the lake. Storm clouds that hovered over the mountain, threatening to break humidity and summer heat, now move over us, open a deluge above my head. And I lie listening as rain sweeps the lake surface, beats on our tin roof, a rain drum. In and out of sleep I drift, not knowing when I'm here or water dreaming. In the next room, my mother and father's slow, rhythmic breathing. At dawn, mist calls the lake. Molson's Island, a thin black crown of pine and hemlocks. My father, gone now too long, rises early, lights the wood stove to take off the dampness, fills the kettle, then climbs the stairs with our tea, small blue pot and china cups. A few hours later, the sun spills through. Leaves rustle their last shapes of water to other leaves, to rocks and the pungent understory. From crevices in the shale cliffs, the final drip, 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 softened by moss and lichen. I wash my face with water from the rain barrel, take in its cedary fragrance, turn my nose to the fresh, metallic air. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. The story of our last guest hardly reads as a conventional narrative when it comes to the making of a poet. For 40 years, Phyllis Size raised a family, ran a construction business, a building inspections company, and cared for seniors. Then she found Foster, and at last in retirement, a little time on her hands to work on something she claims to have dabbled in all her life, the poetry. And here's Phyllis with her latest constructions.
Thank you, Roger. I have always written, but when I started a poem a day with Angela Luke at the beginning of the pandemic, I never imagined where it would take me. Malcolm Gladwell insists on the 10,000-hour rule to become good at anything. I have a long way to go, but it is incredible discipline that I love. I will start by reading a poem inspired from doing Skype school with my grandchildren. The Grand Boy's Skype lessons. Arms rising to mimic flow. His voice shrill, animated. The brain working faster than words will allow. The 7-year-old has left the room. Was it in silent terror? 79 AD. The magma breached its walls. Pompeii buried in ash, and pumice meters thick. They're learning about death. The tarantula, tiger, pangolin, Komodo, cockroach, and jellyfish. All life dies eventually. Tomorrow, we will learn of lightning, the god of fireflies, and hope that knowledge is the way not to be afraid. My best friend Bruce thought he was doing me a favor by buying me a car jack. Winter tires. Man up, heft and haul, 1 to 4, bagged and clear. Right front, left back, brave and brawn. Jack, check. The socket whirs, sledge hammers. Tire tumbles, anti-seize, bronze whirs, socket. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. Repeat 3 more, wash hands. I am woman again. My sister Eve and I have traveled together on so many adventures. This is from Sarawak, Malaysia. Wind cave. The wind cave gives and keeps its silence. The leftover prayers hang off the Buddha. Gifts of oranges, marigolds, and coins. The secrets he has heard whisper through the dripping stones. He sits silent in the murmurs of breath that erode him away. And this from Morocco. I open my paint box and Morocco falls to the page. How do I paint the call to prayer? The taste of prune and almond mixed with lamb. My eyes brush the surroundings. The colors are my palette. Boats awash of cerulean blue. The clay walls find their own tone. Camels blend into the sand, and carpets brighten the darkest corners. I was sent to Rivière-du-Loup to stay with my grandmother in the summer. Granny Russell. My granny used to make me pray I would die before I wake, so God would take my soul. I never knew where he would take it, as it was hard to figure out if my soul was in my stomach or maybe my feet. Anyways, she also made me sing about some guy who promised to buy me some blue velvet ribbons to tie up my bonny brown hair, which she would brush 100 times as I prayed to God she would stop. This is for all the Scots who might be listening. Scottish Highlands. The green velvet is torn by rocks and sword, the history waterfalls to gather in the lore of the lochs. They mingle as lovers entwined. The heather boasts the tartans. Its flowers blush with pride. In its shallow roots, the clan's tales bleed. Rivière-du-Loup is also where my sister and I have bought a house and where I was married. Today would have been my 44th wedding anniversary. Salt wind, my beloved of the constant wind. You push the seagrasses to caress my arms. I stand in the place where we took our vows, wondering if the salt of my tears is joy. Didn't we all learn to do a lot of walking during the pandemic? Crow. His voice broke air, cocky, black chest, pushing it. The walk, 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 cracked. And I replied, walk. I can smell the cold coming, the blood slow to move to toes. I call to him, he calls to her, then he's gone. Walk, walk, walk. Beech tree. Proud in her rags of bronze against a gray-white sky, delicate fronds tremble. She is stubborn to hang on to her leaves. Some as subtle as tissue, sound as waves on a rocky shore. She won't let them go until spring. Force of sap pushing new enfolded furls, powder pale, becomes lush. She finds her pride again. This one last naughty poem. Iconography. She's doing the Gmail Twitter, wearing her cable proudly, but her box is full with communique, rough hashtag fun, a high-speed gig. LOL isn't what you think. The blog, never the same. A hard drive download. Her spam lies listlessly. She boots her icon to reboot her bite, quietly closing her screen. There, now I am 1 hour closer to my 10,000 hours. I would like to thank Bryden Gombe and Angela Luke for all their encouragement, Louise Abbott for this beautiful book, and of course, Jan Draper for all the amazing writers' workshops. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phyllis. That was quite delightful. What I'd like to do now is express our heartfelt thanks to all our participants this evening. It's not easy to read to a screen, but I want to assure you that we, your audience, were out here and that we listened, engaged, captivated, and so grateful that you were willing to share your work with us. Thank you so much. And I want to remind our audience that in fact, you can revisit this poetry, the poetry that you've heard this evening. It was recorded and it will be available on Monday on the Norton Literary Festival site. And so I would certainly encourage you to listen just once more to what you heard. And of course, as Phyllis has just pointed out, Emergence, the anthology is available, published by Studio Georgeville. And that offers you not just the talent that you've heard this evening, but many, many other contemporary women writing in the Eastern Townships. It's quite remarkable to read these poems. And lastly, I want to thank you, our audience, for joining us this evening. We hope that when October comes around, we will be able to hold the Norton Literary Festival in person. And we would love it if you would come and join us then. So please, in the meantime, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and thank you everyone for this evening.